You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y, a South Asian Canadian channel.
Hi, this is Priyanka Chopra and you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media. Y Media. Y Media has newspaper, midweek, radio, South Asian Pulse.
Hi, I'm Amitabh Bachchan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
Hi, this is Amir Khan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
अब हर दिन सुने GTA का #1 रेडियो स्टेशन FM 91.9
Television. You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y.
Prime Minister, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Online, SouthAsianDaily.com. The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media.
This part of the program is brought to you by Midweek Newspaper, published every Tuesday.
Hello everyone, my name is Jadoo. I'm the group editor at Y Media, and on behalf of Y Media Group, we'd like to welcome the former Premier of Quebec and now the candidate for the federal Conservative leadership race, John Fibe. Sir, a very warm welcome on behalf of Y Media. How are you?
I am very, very well, Jadoo, and thank you for having me on, especially during Sikh Heritage Month. So happy Vaisakhi to all your audience and your listeners today.
Yes, it is a Sikh Heritage Month and we are all celebrating Vaisakhi as well. So thank you so much. Wishing you and your entire team a very, very happy Vaisakhi. Mr. Sherry, why don't we get on with the business? We just saw the federal budget being released. What's your take on that?
Well, the budget is always heavy on spending. I mean, the Liberal government of Mr. Trudeau has been in government now for 7 years. We've been through COVID. COVID has been very testing for all of us, and it has meant a high record levels of spending, which were called for to be able to support people and businesses. But as we come out of the COVID, it is now time to look at the longer midterm and get our fiscal house in order, clean up our balance sheet. That's one part of it. The other part is that we need economic policies that will actually give us some economic growth. And if there's one thing that I find is at fault in the Liberal government of Mr. Trudeau is that they're all on the spending side. I mean, COVID obviously, but also new spending in this budget. And that just feeds inflation. Inflation now is so high, it's actually higher than wage growth, which means that people are losing ground. So in this budget, if there's something lacking, I think it's really policies that would encourage economic growth and people having more money in their pockets.
So let me listen from you. What are your policies? Because one of the reasons that I've seen the last two times the Conservatives lost, I still remember the very next day I was at the CBC studios and they asked, why did the Conservatives lose the last two elections? I said it's because they didn't have anything different to offer. So if you become the leader, you become the Prime Minister, what are any different things that you're offering?
Well, if I become the leader of the Conservative Party, which, by the way, is going to happen in this leadership race. This leadership race is about memberships, and people have until the 3rd of June to take up a membership to be able to be eligible to vote for a vote where the final casting of the ballots will be counted on the 10th of September. And what people want in this leadership race is a Conservative leader who's going to be able to unite the party and present a national government in the next election campaign, which wasn't the case in the last UDVA. And, in the GTA in particular, we did not do well. But we didn't do well because our immigration policies were not at the level they should have been. On climate, we were not there also. And I think that the key for us is going to be to present policies that promote economic growth in a national government. And that means supporting the oil and gas sector. It means supporting pipelines. It means supporting projects that are going to allow us to export more and gain more revenue. A better control of spending, better control of taxes will also allow people to have more money in their pockets.
Can you be a little bit more specific? Yes, these are quite generic terms. How would you spur the growth? How would we create more jobs? The unemployment is almost at a historic low, but again, better jobs are always needed. Please, more specifics on this one.
Well, I would be very supportive of the resource sector. I'm thinking, for example, of mining in Canada, where we need to mine critical and strategic resources to be able to develop and transition into the new economy. I would. That's a very real example. I did that with Plan A here in Quebec when I was premier. That's the kind of thing. I also think, immigration could be used as a much better tool to promote economic growth. And what I have in mind is a very forward-looking immigration policy that would target talent all over the world, whether researchers or professionals or skilled labor, and even some non-skilled labor, to bring them into this country to help build our economy. And as we do that, I think one of the things we need to focus on is the recognition of qualifications that people have rather than sending them back to school. And if we do that right, if we do immigration integration right, we can be the forward-looking country in the world and a step of everyone else. But what it will do is create more entrepreneurship. It will create also more economic growth. And that's the kind of thing that I'd be focused on.
I think the word integration itself is music to my ears, but how do we integrate people? We have really failed, Canadians, we really failed in this area of integration. Any new portfolio, any new department, what are your ideas on integration?
You and I definitely agree on it. There's two ingredients to successful immigration. One of them is that those who come to this country need to be fully motivated to integrate, and the country that hosts them has to be fully motivated to integrate them. When you have both ingredients, then is when you are able to do it successfully. Now, how do you integrate? There's three things. A job, that's the first thing. Allowing people to integrate into a job very rapidly, and that means recognizing professional credentials more rapidly and in a more efficient way than we've done in the past. The second thing is language. We have to do everything in our power so that people are given the resources and the abilities to be able to communicate in the official languages of Canada. The third thing is to integrate them into a community. And that's very much about Canadians and their ability to host people from all over the world and sponsor them, and maybe have, use all the available resources to sponsor people to come into the country. Those are the ways that we should do it.
What happened in Ottawa recently, two different viewpoints. Pierre Poilievre is calling that from the freedom perspective, the freedom convoy, and here you're calling it a blockade. Why this difference of opinion?
Well, there's no difference of opinion here. There is a situation where there was a blockade in Ottawa. You saw it, I did, our listeners here. Anyone who's saying there wasn't a blockade, frankly, has to explain what it is exactly. And I'll refer to the Supreme Court Justice. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada gave an interview just a few days ago, Yudville, saying that what happened in Ottawa was something terrible in his eyes and was illegal, and condemning those who supported this. Now, if you want to be a privileged person in this country, be a legislator, and you're making laws and you're changing laws, well, Yudville, you don't have the option to break the law. I can't make laws and say to you, obey the laws of the land and obeys the laws I make, and not myself obey them. That's a real test of leadership. And anyone who doesn't respect that or understands that, I don't think is up to being a leader of a political party, even less being a prime minister and being the chief legislator of the land. The laws of the land are not a buffet table. You don't walk in and choose what you want. And you don't, and as a legislator, you can't put yourself above the law either. So that's a clear difference between Mr. Poilievre and I. Mr. Poilievre was part of the government in 2015 that proposed, as you know, the NICAB legislation and the hotline. He in this race has taken a very aggressive stance. He practices an American-style politics of wedge politics and sloganism and attack dogs. It's not what I want for my country. I don't think it's what you want either. Canada is not the United States. And I think what Canadians want is a Canadian leadership for a country that has its own history and values and wants to practice politics in its own way.
Despite all those things that you just mentioned, I've seen Poilievre attracting huge crowds. Our Y Media team was covering the events here in Toronto and in Vancouver as well recently. So how would you tell Canadians, especially the Conservative Party members, that how are you any different than Pierre Poilievre?
Well, we're very different. You know, I have a view of the Conservative Party that it should be a national political party, that the country needs an adult in the room in terms of governing both the party and then the country. We're very different in our view, our responsibilities as legislators, as we've just mentioned. He thinks he can support illegal blockades, and that's okay. I don't. I think it's a question of principle that you cannot. We have a different view on Bill 21 in Quebec. I opposed Bill 21, when I was Premier of Quebec and Bill 21 was raised. This is the law, by the way, that outlaws religious symbols. And when I was Premier of Quebec, this was presented to me in a recommendation from a commission that we had put together. And I refused to do it. And I refused to do it because of a question of a principle. And it was contrary to the Quebec Charter and the Canadian Charter, and it was unpopular. It would have been more popular for me to do it. And I have said in this leadership race, even if this law is very popular in Quebec, I've said here in Quebec that if the law went to the Supreme Court of Canada, that the government of Canada would present its position. Mr. Poilievre has said he wouldn't do that he would not defend those who are affected by this law in the Supreme Court of Canada. There you have it. Pretty big difference for a community like the Sikh community in Canada, isn't it?
Yeah. As much as I agree with you on Bill 21, I personally think it's a discriminatory law. But your position on this one, this raises two questions. Even in 2011, when the Conservatives won a majority, we all know out of the 78 federal seats in Quebec, Conservatives couldn't do well. And recently, even before the elections come out, I usually predict less than 20 seats for the Conservatives in Quebec. And then Conservatives are almost shut out here in GTA. Precisely these are the 2 points which any Conservative leader will have to figure out if they have to win even a minority, let alone a majority government. How will you figure out these 2 things?
Well, I will, and that's a fundamental difference between Mr. Poilievre and myself. I will win a majority national government. In Quebec, there are 32 bloc MPs, 32. And if I'm the leader of the party, all those seats will be Conservative seats. I will win all those seats. And you just watch the bloc react when I become leader of the party and how aggressive they're going to become. And then in the greater Toronto area, we only have 2 seats. 2 seats. And why is that the case? Well, from every account I've heard from our candidates who were running in that campaign, we still carried the scars of the 2015 campaign, of which Mr. Poilievre was part of, and the policies that were proposed on immigration. People remembered that. In my case, what I'm going to offer is a very forward-looking view on immigration that will say to new Canadians that they are part of our family and that we love them and that we are going to build a country together. So that's a very different approach from the one that we've seen in the past and that people remember. And the same is true for the lower mainland of British Columbia. So put it all together, whether it's the island of Montreal, the GTA in Toronto, lower mainland of British Columbia, even outside of Montreal. And what you'll have with me as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada is a national Conservative government.
Here is China, from whom we cannot even get the answer about coronavirus and its origins. Russia, we're all seeing in a very different and aggressive tone with Vladimir Putin at the helm of the affairs. How are we going to deal with the US and India? If you could touch upon your foreign policy.
On foreign policy, Canada is way below where it should be. I mean, we've lost our voice in the world. Canada does not have influence. And I was part of a government that pushed back against apartheid in South Africa, supported Nelson Mandela. I saw a prime minister, a conservative prime minister, go toe-to-toe with Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan on this issue. I was part of a government that did trade agreements with the United States and Mexico, did this, Clean Air Act with the United States in 1990. I mean, in those days, Canada had a voice. We had influence in the world. We don't now. And I think one of the key issues, I put out a defense policy last week, but one of the key issues for the future of the country is going to be our Arctic region. I would open 2 military bases in the Canadian Arctic, one with a deep water port. And, we have Russia as a neighbor in the Arctic. But even our American neighbor, Udville, does not recognize the Northwest Passage as being Canadian territory. They go out of their way to say it's an international waterway. So on international policy, we have a lot of work to do. But one of the things I would be very focused on would be making doing everything we can to occupy the Canadian Arctic in particular.
All right, and just earlier you mentioned being fiscally responsible on budget. Now you're talking about defense spending here. If you move it to 2% of GDP, which is we've just moved from 1.4 to 1.5. There's almost a gap of 14 to 16 billion dollar. Harjit Sajjan, I talked to him when he was a defense minister. He spoke with Anita Anand. They all wanted an increase. So would you be fiscally responsible or an increase of $15 billion budget in the defense itself?
When the Liberal government left and was replaced by the Legault government in Quebec, we left an $8 billion surplus. $8 billion. You're not going to see that in your lifetime. And Quebec has a higher credit rating in Quebec than Ontario. Now, I mention that because I have a track record in terms of managing public finances. Yes, we need to reach 2% of GDP in investing in national defense. We're going to do it gradually. I mean, you can't buy planes and submarines and radars equipment overnight. It isn't sold on a shelf. It has to be gradually done, but done in a way that is very efficient with a very clear objective. Now, the Liberal government in 2015 get elected and they cancel the purchase that the previous government had planned on doing to buy the F-35 planes to replace the CF-18s. Here we are 7 years later, and then they decide to buy the planes and tried to, go through a process of procurement that was a waste of time. Those are the things that cost the country a lot of resources, time, and money, frankly, wasted money. So I have experience running a fiscally conservative government and allowing our country to also implement policies. But it's all about economic growth. If you don't have economic growth, you'll always be turning in circles. And if the only thing you do is spend, well, we know where that leads us. So a good, solid conservative agenda, the type I would put forward, would allow us to do these things and to do it in a way that's gradual, orderly, and reasonable for taxpayers.
You're only attacking Pierre Poilievre. Is it because he's the front runner, or you have some sort of deal with Patrick Brown or Leslie West? Yeah.
Well, I am the underdog in this race. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I've been the underdog all my life. I mean, that's the only. I don't think I've experienced anything else but that. So that's why in this race it's important to draw comparisons with Mr. Poilievre, who I think is the front runner from what we hear. But even you mentioned he's attracting crowds. So did Mr. Bernier attract crowds. He got 5% of the vote. At the end of the day, you know what will count here? It'll be members in the party. It'll be the membership. They are the ones who vote. They're the ones who decide. And we have until the 3rd of June. So anyone interested in supporting me needs to take up a membership of the Conservative Party of Canada or go to jeancharest.ca, and we will give them that information. And that's what's going to decide who the next leader will be.
Mr. Charest, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll have you here at our Channel Y studios and we'll discuss in detail. Thank you so much for your time. Anything else we add before I let you go?
I thank you very much for hosting me today, and have a great month in the whole Sikh community. And I'd be delighted to be in studio with you soon. Thank you. Thank you.
Looking forward, Mr. Charest. And we were talking to the Conservative Party leadership candidate, Jean Charest, who's a former Premier of Quebec. Thank you, and we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y, a South Asian Canadian channel.